They say monsters fear nothing, but I watched one kneel for a bleeding puppy. That was the night I learned even darkness has a heartbeat. If you believe compassion is stronger than cruelty, don't forget to like this story and subscribe for more tales where mercy wins in the unlikeliest of places. Because this one still haunts the halls of the Vampire King's citadel. It began on a night when the storm itself seemed angry at the world, clawing at the mountains with black rain and thunder that sounded like gods breaking chains. I had been stationed at the eastern watchtower, half asleep on my spear, when I saw her, a girl no older than 16, barefoot, limping through the downpour, clutching something wrapped in a torn cloak. The gates of the Blood Citadel had not opened to humans in over a century, and yet, as lightning cracked across the sky, she stumbled against them and whispered something I couldn't hear, and they opened. On their own. The iron doors that had resisted sieges and sorcery creaked apart, as if obeying her voice. We should have killed her then, by every law of the night. But there was something in the way she fell to her knees, in the way her body shook, not just from cold, but from desperation so raw it silenced even the boldest guards. When I approached, she lifted her head slightly, and I saw what she carried. A tiny creature, drenched and half dead, its fur matted with blood. A puppy, I thought, until I saw its eyes, silver in the dark, glowing faintly with the light of the moon. It wasn't just any stray. It was a moonhound, a species thought extinct since the Third War. We dragged her inside, though none of us could explain why. Maybe pity, maybe curiosity, maybe the fact that every guard in that courtyard felt something they hadn't in years, unease. When the girl was brought before the throne, the great hall was nearly silent except for the crackle of the obsidian braziers. King Aldrich sat high above, a silhouette of armor and shadow, his crown glinting like frozen blood. I'd served him long enough to know that nothing ever startled him. Until that night. When the guards dropped the soaked bundle at his feet, the girl fell forward with it, shielding the puppy with her own body. "Please," she gasped, voice barely more than a whisper, "he's hurt." The hound whimpered weakly, one paw twitching. The courtiers began to laugh, soft and cruel. "A human child begs for a beast," someone sneered. "What next?" Sheil asked for a throne. But then the king spoke, his voice quiet enough to make the room freeze. "Leave her." Even the courtiers stopped breathing. The girl trembled but did not move. I swear, I saw it, the faintest shimmer around her, as though the air itself bent toward her pain. The hound raised its head, eyes meeting the king's, and gave a small, broken growl, not of threat, but of defiance. Aldrich rose. That never happened. In 600 years, I had never seen the king descend from his throne for anyone. Yet he walked down the marble steps until he stood over them. The girl's lips moved again. "Please," she whispered. He tried to protect me. That word, protect, hung in the air like a spell. And then, in one motion that silenced centuries of cruelty, the king knelt. He touched the hound's flank, and when his fingers came away red, he turned to his steward. "Summon the healers. Both of them live." The court erupted in disbelief. Lady Seraphine hissed, "Your Majesty, that creature carries corruption." But Aldrich didn't answer. He looked at the girl instead, really looked at her, and something in his expression changed. The storm outside calmed as if taking its cue from him. I remember helping carry them to the inner infirmary, a place reserved for the king's bloodline. The girl wouldn't let go of the hound, even unconscious. Her hands were white with cold, but her grip was iron. When I asked who she was, the steward simply said, "A mistake that shouldn't be alive." But I couldn't shake the image of the king's face when he saw her. That flicker of something almost human. That night, while the rest of the court whispered of curses and omens, I passed the infirmary again. Through the cracked door, I saw King Aldrich standing by their bedside, his armor off, his expression unreadable. The hound stirred weakly, its silver eyes opening, and the girl murmured in her sleep, "Stay with me." The king looked between them, then did something I'll never forget. He reached out and brushed the girl's damp hair from her forehead with a tenderness that didn't belong to a vampire at all. They say that moment changed him, that it was the first time in centuries the Vampire King had chosen to save instead of destroy. I can't say if that's true, but I know this. When dawn came, the storm was gone, and for the first time in memory, sunlight touched the citadel's gates without burning. And somewhere deep inside those walls, a moonhound howled, not in pain, but in promise. By the time dawn broke over the Blood Citadel, the girl was no longer just a trespasser. She was a mystery no one dared to touch. Her name, we learned, was Alara, and for days she stayed in the king's private infirmary, watched over by guards who were more afraid of her silence than her presence. The moonhound, too, survived, though barely. Its wounds were deep, unnatural, the kind that resisted even vampire healing. Yet it never growled, never lashed out. It simply lay beside her bed, watching her breathe. When she stirred, it whimpered and tried to stand, as if afraid she might vanish if it blinked. I was there the morning she finally woke, pale and trembling, whispering a single word that made the creature lift its head. Lumen. That was its name. It meant light in one of the dead human tongues, a cruel irony for two souls trapped in the darkest court on earth. The king visited at dusk. He stood at the foot of her bed, still armored, his shadow long and cold across the stone. "You're awake," he said, a statement, not a question. Alara tried to rise, but he gestured for her to stay. "Tell me," he continued quietly, "where did you find that creature?" She hesitated, eyes flicking to the hound. "In the forest," she whispered. "He was bleeding. I just wanted to help." The nobles who'd gathered behind the king murmured in disbelief. "Humans don't wander into our woods by accident," one hissed. But Aldrich ignored them. He crouched beside the moonhound, examining the matted fur where its flanks still oozed faint silver blood. That's when he saw it, a sigil burned into the skin, faint but unmistakable, a ring of thorns encircling an open eye. The mark of the Inquisitors. The moment he touched it, the air around us crackled like a struck nerve. The mark pulsed faintly, as if aware it had been recognized. "This is no forest wound," the king said, his voice hardening. "It's a curse." One of the courtiers gasped. "My lord, if it carries Inquisitor magic, it should be destroyed before it spreads." But Aldrich's gaze snapped to her, and she fell silent. "You will not speak of this beyond these walls." He turned back to Alara, whose eyes had filled with tears. "Please," she said, "don't hurt him. He didn't choose this." And then, without warning, she convulsed, arching back, a strangled cry ripping from her throat as faint light flared beneath her skin. The same sigil blazed across her chest, glowing through the thin fabric like fire beneath glass. Panic swept the room. The healers rushed forward, but the king barked, "Stand back." He pressed his palm to the mark, ignoring the hiss of burning flesh, and the light flickered, then dimmed. When it faded, both Alara and the hound lay motionless, breathing, but barely. The king's hand smoked where it had touched her. "They share the curse," he said softly, more to himself than anyone. "Two lives bound by one wound. Kill one, the other dies." The steward stammered. Then, "Sire, what do we break it?" Aldrich interrupted. "No matter the cost." That order sent the court into chaos. The Blood Council demanded he reconsider. Inquisitor magic was forbidden, toxic to immortals. But Aldrich silenced them with a glance that could have frozen the sun. "Summon my blood mages," he commanded. "Tell them to prepare the old chamber. I will offer what's needed." The steward's face went white. "Your Majesty, vampire blood cannot undo Inquisitor curses. It consumes it. Then it will consume me," Aldrich said, turning away. "But I will not let a child and her beast die for someone else's trap." Later that night, I stood outside the sealed ritual chamber, the torches dimming as the mages traced runes of protection along the floor. Through the crack beneath the door, I saw the glow of blood magic, and the faint silhouette of the king kneeling beside the girl and her hound, his hand over her heart, whispering words in an ancient tongue I didn't know vampires remembered. The air trembled with power, and somewhere deep beneath the citadel, I heard the gates groan, as if the castle itself feared what was coming. I thought I'd seen cruelty, power, and pride in my years of service. But that night, I saw something different. A king who looked into a curse meant to kill him, and chose mercy anyway. They said no one could survive the old blood rites, that Inquisitor curses devoured even the strongest immortal. But at dawn, when the doors to the ritual chamber finally opened, King Aldrich still stood. The floor around him was scorched black, the sigils burned away, and in his arms lay the girl and the moonhound, both alive. He looked like a man who had wrestled death itself and refused to let it win. The healers rushed forward, but he waved them off, lowering Alara gently to the floor. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed, and the hound beside her lifted its head, whining softly. When she reached for it, Aldrich caught her trembling hand and said, "It's over." But the mark on her chest had vanished, leaving only a faint scar shaped like a crescent moon. "You broke it," she whispered, and though her voice was weak, the words carried through the silent hall. "You saved us." The king looked down at his burned palms, at the faint silver cracks running through his skin where the curse had bitten deep. "Not just you," he said quietly. "The curse was a door. Someone wanted me to open it." Later that day, the Blood Council assembled, furious that the king had risked himself for a peasant girl and a beast. Commander Vex demanded her execution, claiming she was still a danger, that Inquisitor magic never truly dies. Aldrich said nothing at first. He simply stood, his presence filling the chamber like a storm waiting to break. "I saw what danger looks like," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "It doesn't look like her." He turned to Alara, who stood barefoot at the entrance, the moonhound pressed to her leg. "It looks like fear." And then he did something none of us expected. He knelt before her. "You carried courage into a place that has forgotten what it means to feel," he said. "If this court has any honor left, it will learn from you." The hall fell silent. No one dared speak after that. When night came, the girl and her hound were given a place within the royal gardens, the first humans allowed to stay within the citadel walls in 100 years. I often saw them there after that, the hound padding at her side, the king watching from the balcony above. The courtiers whispered that he was changed, that his gaze had softened, that the air around the throne no longer felt so cold. Perhaps they were right. One evening, as I passed the courtyard, I saw the girl kneeling beside the king himself, showing him how to feed the moonhound from his hand. He laughed, a sound that startled even the stars. Months later, the royal decree came. The sanctuary of blood and light, open to any creature, human, vampire, or beast, seeking refuge. Some called it madness. I called it redemption. And though many still feared him, the people began to tell a new story of their immortal ruler. Not the tyrant who ruled through fear, but the king who had once knelt for a dying puppy, and the girl who carried it through the storm. They say the moonhound still roams the citadel at night, its silver eyes gleaming like twin stars, guarding the gates that opened for mercy's sake. And sometimes, when the wind moves just right, you can hear its distant howl, soft, grateful, and full of light.